here at Crafty Hope. Welcome to my messy desk. I am working on, or about to work on, day 34 of the 100-day project, and my personal project is hashtag not precious project. And that just means I'm taking all of those things from my stash that I have deemed too precious, that I might ruin, that I might mess up, and have not touched because they're just too nice. And y'all, I've done that with like pretty much everything that's in my stash. And I've got, 33 days of proving to myself that when I use these items, I make things that I find to be very precious, very nice. Now, I just finished a really fun snippet roll that took me, I don't even know how many days, y'all, but I enjoyed the process. I used papers and little things and stickers and all that I had put aside because they were too nice to just use on anything. Please excuse the dog. I don't know what's wrong with her. There's a butterfly, maybe? Oh, hold on. Oh, gracious. Sorry about that. So I'm trying to use these not precious things to make some beautiful art. And I'm using different things to make any of the media that I create, because I create mixed media art and paper crafts and assemblage projects and jewelry and anything that I can do. I love to use found objects and treasures and things. But you can see here, I have, this is some Tim Holtz, what are they called? Gauge frames that I picked up. And y'all, I think I have 3 packages of these that I got on clearance at Hobby Lobby. And I decided, you know what? I have plenty of these. I'm going to pull them out. And I've pulled out this one, and it's in another set. But I think I want to work with this one. So I had, at the start of the project, I'm going to over-explain all of this, and I apologize. At the start of the project, I decided to not overload myself by having to choose precious things from all of my stash, which is expansive. Instead, I curated a small collection of things that I said, okay, I can pull out from this stash to work from so I'm not so overloaded, and then add things in as I need. So both this package and this vintage fabric of some kind, I think it's supposed to be some kind of doll clothes, maybe. I got a whole bag of incomplete vintage doll clothes. So these 2 things were in there, and I think I'm going to try to work with these 2 things. So I have this gauge frame and this lacy fabric thing. I've got lots of it. And I really wanted to frame up an old photo. So I found this one that was already damaged. It had been bent, and when I went to pull it out, I mean, it seriously, like, this one little bit was holding it on and it fell apart. So I kind of want to somehow have his eyes peeking through this frame, add some lace, I don't know. I've also pulled out a spool of rusty wire that I picked up at an estate sale. I've got one of these Tim Holtz, what are they called? Like a vignette box, I think is what they are. This is more Tim Holtz stuff. This is some of the backdrops, I think. This is Backdrops Volume 2, and I have another one over here. I don't know which volume it is. But I've made these precious as well, and I've also got some watercolor paper because, yeah. So we're going to see what happens. So I'm going to take all this. We'll see how much I work on today. My idea for this Not Precious project is not to complete something every day or use 100 items or make 100 things, but is to spend 100 days working with some of these things that I have deemed too precious previously and make them not so precious. All right, let's see what happens. I knew I was going to over-explain that, and I apologize. I also apologize for, at the top of my screen, my lamp that's up there wiggling. I hope it doesn't drive you crazy the way it's driving me crazy. I couldn't see it in my little viewfinder on my camera, so I apologize about that. I do like these little intros that are live because you get to hear a little bit of my thought process on that day and time, because I'm now doing this voiceover and the 100-day project has ended. So it gives you and me a look at what I was feeling. So as you can see, I pulled out these rust paste. Mine are completely dried up. So I added some water, stirred them up with that was a bamboo skewer, and I am going in with a paintbrush. So I'm starting with the darkest one. These are pastes that are made by Finnabair and Prima Marketing that are to look like rust. They are no way rust. Now I've got little breaks in here because it's where I stopped to like clean up my desk or stir some more of that paste. But I started with the dark brown just to get a base layer on that gauge frame, and now I'm using the actual like rust color, the orangey rust color one, and I'm making sure to leave plenty of like good clumps and stuff, because that's a big thing with rust, is you get lots of lumps and bumps and all of that. So and these are both texture paste, or it's a set of 3, and they're texture paste that give you both the color and that texture of rust. So once I get the brown and the orange down, I'm going to come in with the yellow one. It is less textured than the other 3, but it is also dried up. So again, more water, bamboo skewer. I'm gonna stir that up as best I can, and because the yellow for me isn't like one of the highlights of a bit of rust, I'm really just gonna dab it in a couple places with the end of that bamboo skewer. You see, just kind of getting just a tiny bit of it down, and I'm blending it out a little bit with my finger so it's not so prominent. And I am dipping the end of that bamboo skewer in some water to clean it off. And I'll come back with a little more of the brown and a little more of the orange, and just kind of work this until it has that feeling of rust to me. I wanted this to feel ancient and old and kind of rusty. Especially since I have that rusty wire there, and I kept looking at it too, kind of thinking, okay, what does rust look like? Let me get this going. So I'm gonna pat on this. It doesn't take super long for this rust paste to dry, but I'll give it its time. I do think at some point I realized that like the edges of this don't have near as much rust as I would like on it. I'm going to go ahead and tell you too that when I finished this assemblage, I did put it in at the gallery, at Hello Gallery in Fairhope, and it has already sold. So I really thought this project was going to take me more than one day, but I did all of this in one day. It was super simple and reminds me not to overthink these things. So that is a bit of Rub and Buff, and y'all, I can't ever remember. There's 2 in that package I have. One is antique gold and one is gold foil, I think, or gold leaf. That's it. One's gold leaf and one's antique gold, and I'm using one of them just on the little like screws that are on there. And I am using my finger to spread it. So when I did that, I think I got some of that gold in an area where maybe I didn't want it. So I'm going to come back in and touch it up a bit. And I may have brushed off some of the stuff with my fingers and handling it, all of that. So I'm going to use that rust paste again to just touch things up a little bit and get them back the way I think it should be. And I don't know why I felt like those screw heads or whatever wouldn't be rusted, but I think I just wanted a little bit of shine and sparkle on there. So that's, I think, the bulk of it. So I'm going to put all this stuff up from my desk. I've got all my like waxes and pastes and everything in one box. All right, so next I think I'm going to start figuring out how I want to attach the gentleman's photo to this. And again, my camera was off, so that's why my lamp is in there, and I'm working way down at the bottom. This is really where I'm working, is the middle of my desk. And it looks like it's the bottom because my camera positioning was off, and I apologize. So I did take a pencil and trace the outside of that frame, and I'm going to cut just slightly inside where I traced, because I do want to make sure that there is some surface of this photo touching that frame, so I have a way to adhere it. And I'm going to ink the edges. It's not going to show really, but if for some reason the edges of that photo do kind of can be seen outside of that gauge frame, I want to make sure that they're like blended in and feel kind of aged. All right, so I'm lining it up again, checking everything. Yep, gonna make another little trim. Did I even think to? Yeah, I'm trimming again, and I'm hoping that I remember to go ahead and use that. It's walnut stain distress ink. It's what I always use. Yeah, I'm gonna clean that up just a little bit and make sure I get all the white, because when you cut the edge of a paper, the white edges always tend to show, and I really didn't want that showing there. So I'm sorry if you can hear the cat meowing. You know, the dog was in the first part of this, and now I've got a cat circling me and hollering at me. All right, so I'm going to bring in the Fabri-Tac. I was just using so many surfaces. I wanted something, a little more solid and permanent, and I always feel like Fabri-Tac for some reason works so well. And you can see I just put it along the top. There's not, because of the way that photo tore, there's not much surface at the bottom of it, so I didn't even bother trying to glue it down there. And I'm going to give it a second to cure. Make sure nothing's going to move and none of that. Yep, look, I'm having to trim more. Isn't that crazy? As much as I trim that. And I think it's looking pretty awesome. Some of the original metal is indeed poking through, but that's fine. You know, maybe this is just the beginning of something to rust. Okay, y'all. So I pull out this lace. I cut it down. I fiddled with it. I fiddled with the backdrop papers. Look, I've got this little weird collar on him. Keep trying to position it. I put it up here where it looks like bunny ears for some reason. And I'm going to admit to you, this lace is not going to make its way into this assemblage. So that's why I cut all that out. Me cutting it out, me getting it, because it's just not going to, it didn't work with these masculine eyes. It was adding too much femininity and whimsy, I think. So instead, I was like, well, let me go ahead and get this rusty wire. So I'm using my big wire cutters there to cut this. Y'all, I don't even know what gauge. It's at least... probably at least a 16 gauge wire. And I grabbed, this is a gelato container that I'm going to wrap around this just to get a shape. I wanted something nice and big that would encircle that gauge frame. So, and you can see it is big enough. So, and it just needed to be something that was sturdy, because some other containers are too squishy to wrap around. And once I did that, I took one end of it, and you can see I'm wrapping it around that wire just to kind of secure the ends of it. Probably with that being rusty wire, probably should have been wearing some gloves. So y'all, I know I tote being safe, but sometimes when it comes to wire, I just kind of go in there and I pull out that I was like, this isn't going to work. I don't need this. So once I get that wrapped up and kind of make some of those decisions, I'm going to grab another big pair of pliers. These are some chain nose, and I'm going to use it to kind of secure those ends a little bit more and start shaping that wire. For some reason, I decided to make it into a heart. Now, heart motifs are not usually my jam, but it really works with this. So I don't know. I kind of went with it. That instinct, and it definitely works. So, and it's a real sloppy heart. I'm going to try to work on fixing it. Those ends are poking out. I'm going to really try to secure those, because in the end, even though this is going to be in a piece of art, I just don't want somebody to accidentally touch it and get poked by rusty wire. I don't want that on me. So yeah, I am wrapping these things, getting them secured, and then, testing it to make sure that I haven't messed up, making sure it was big enough to go around this gauge frame. So now I'm sorting back through those backdrop papers to find something that really this pops off of, and I found this like ledger type one and was like, okay, this one is much better. So I've grabbed that vignette box, and I'm kind of like thinking about things real hard, and I'm going to measure. And then once I get a measurement of what size the inside of this box is, I take it to my guillotine cutter or paper cutter, whatever you've got, and I cut it down to size. So I'm going to slip it in there just to double check that it's the right size, that it'll fit in there. And y'all, I'm cutting this down because once I got it in there, I was like, oh no, now I have to get it out. So I had to get tweezers and everything else to get it out so I could do what I wanted to do next, which is ink the edges of it, because I wanted that like brown from the box to kind of bleed in to the paper, so it wasn't like a stark contrast between the edges of the paper and that box. So I'm inking them, and you can see how like messy I'm bleeding that in. And in fact, I even decide here I'm going to crumple it all up. Just so that some of those lines, so it feels more aged, and so some of those, like the crinkle edges, will pick up some of that ink a little bit more. So you can see how I'm bringing that in a bit. And I am going to keep this basically up and down so it's not too wacky if I turn this paper sideways or anything like that. It's very much going to be like it was a piece of ledger behind this. Apparently I had a problem with with that, so I'm going to stick that in there again, make sure everything looks the way I want, because it's a lot harder to work with that paper once I put it in the box. So I wanted to make sure it was all just the way I wanted before I put it in the box. I was trying to decide what glue to use there, and finally just settled on some wood glue. This is just it's basic wood glue from the Dollar Tree. I am using my fancy glue spreader thing that I think my husband found it at the local hardware store, but you can get them. I'll put a link to it on Amazon. It's great. One end is this silicone brush that I'm using that helps spread the glue, and then the other one has this like flat surface, kind of like a palette knife type thing. That I've used for other, like scraping little things and stuff like that. So, once I get that all spread, and what's great about that, the silicone side, once the glue dries, you can kind of like pop the dried glue out, which is really satisfying. So, all right, I am using a key card there to help me spread out, push the glue out underneath and make sure this all lies flat. I'm also pulling out any of the excess glue with it. This flattening of it does take out some of the crinkling I did in the background, but that was kind of, you can see a little bit of it along with like the ink that I applied, like I said, picked up the edges of the crinkles. So, and of course I got to get my hands in there. If all else fails, use the tools that God gave you. And that's your fingers. So now I'm going to start trying to line this up a little bit, put everything kind of where I want it. And yeah, I'm trying to make room on my desk because look at everything I've got there. I've got like jewelry tools and inks and papers and wire and everything. What did I do next? I know all the things I did. So I'm cleaning. Yeah, I felt like some of that paste, the texture paste, was flaking. And I wanted to try something a little experimental. So I brought out my encaustic wax. Now this is a wax that is part Damar resin and part beeswax that you can melt to seal things. I am not an encaustic wax expert. I just think it's kind of fun to play with every now and then. So I decided to put that over his eyes to I wanted them to feel like they were behind something, like sealed in something. And that just seemed like, I don't know, for some reason the encaustic wax seemed kind of a cool thing to do. Now, I don't know that in the finished piece you will really see that, but for me it was a neat experiment to kind of play with and see what happened. Now, you can see me pushing it around my desk. I was trying not to get too much of it in different areas as well. I wanted to make sure if it was going to slide in one direction. I don't know. I was just trying to get it even more than anything. I do want to apologize that I only have 2 photos at the end of this video because I forgot to get more pictures before I put it in the shop. So, and like I said, it's sold, so I can't go get any more. So I did what I could. If you have any questions about it, definitely let me know. All right, I've got a couple little wood blocks there. These are from Dollar Tree, and I'm painting them in brown, but just the sides that are going to be like visible from the outside. Anything I'm going to glue, I'm not putting paint on, because that's a barrier between the glue and the surface. And I already know that I'm going to have, because I put the paper down, the whole sheet, I'm going to have a barrier between the glue and the box. Between the wood blocks, the glue, and the box. So I'm doing what I can not to have too much barriers between the glue and the surfaces. I hope that makes sense. So I'm letting those dry as I'm moving things around, and I'm going to go ahead and glue in my little heart, I believe, while I'm letting the paint dry on those wood blocks. So I'm using E6000 because I am gluing this rusty metal in here. It's a nice heavy surface, so I need a nice heavy glue. And of course, it's such a heavy glue that my cap is stuck on. I always have trouble with it. It's such a good glue that it just gets everywhere. So I'm going to add, I've got to clean it all up. It glues itself closed, I promise you. But I love it. It's like probably my favorite adhesive. So there, I am putting just on the surfaces, I'm putting the glue on the surfaces that are going to actually be touching the paper. So there are certain areas that I know, like where I wrapped that wire between it, that wire isn't probably going to be touching the surface. So I don't need to use too much glue. So I press that there, let it dry. So that E6000, the heart is dry. It is in place. And now I'm trying to figure out kind of where I want to put those blocks. And the reason I'm adding those blocks behind this is to lift it, to elevate it, give it some dimension in here so that it's not just a flat 2D kind of surface. It gives it that interest. So I'm going to go ahead and put that E6000. I guess I did put a barrier there. I don't know why. I don't know why I painted the top of that. That was silly of me. In future projects, I did not, because I learned in this one. So I glued those blocks together, put the glue on those, and I didn't paint that surface. And then I'm going to, rather than trying to place the blocks on my gauge frame, my dude there, I placed him on the blocks. So I hope that makes sense. And then I'm going to add the glue to the back of the blocks, place that where I want inside my heart, and then I'm going to weigh it down. And y'all, that's it. This is done. I didn't add a sentiment. I didn't do anything else. I kept this super simple, and I really love it. I hope you do too. If you do all those things that help me out, give me a thumbs up, make sure you're subscribed, and let me know if you have any questions. I will see y'all later with more art of this 100-day project and all the iCAD that's going on and everything. So I'll see y'all soon. Bye.